Good afternoon, all, and welcome to our Zoom Hangout, Unpacked, the law school application process and COVID-19. My name is Justin Williams. I am the Associate Director of Admissions and Diversity Recruitment here at Wayne State University Law School. Full disclosure, I am not a public health expert, so I don't have answers to any questions that exist in that realm, but I'll do the best I can today to provide you all with at least decent advice as it relates to managing and controlling the things you can control about the law school application process in this context, what we are doing at Wayne, what some schools like us may be doing out there in the space, and just some good considerations for you all as you think about your next steps going forward here. Also, a good bulk of this content will be useful if you're coming to us as a prospective student who's just thinking about the process broadly, right? So if you aren't thinking narrowly about what you'll do in the most immediate context of the law school application process, but thinking about next year or the year after that, what we talk about today will also be useful for you. So let's just begin with the elephant in the room and start talking about these considerations for you all, right? As we think about what law school admissions is going to look like in the new COVID-19 reality that we live in. I think it starts with two very big questions that I think almost everybody in some capacity is trying to get answered, especially those who are thinking about starting law school in the fall or are in the application process presently. So the first question is, has it changed the law school admissions timeline? And I think the answer to that is probably some, right? I think there's a little bit of it that's different than than what we would normally do, right? In that we're considering looking at the process and applicants a little further along in the process. So as you all know, we missed an LSAT or two in this process, right? So we've missed the March LSAT, the April LSAT has been canceled, the LSAT Flex is coming up. So I know for us as an institution, we will be considering those applicants who sit for that LSAT Flex. So if you have questions about whether or not we as an institution will be doing that, you can count on us participating and accepting those scores. So if that's a part of your consideration on whether or not to take it, I think it's a definite for us that we'll accept those. We'll also accept the last LSAT of the cycle, right? Depending on when that score comes out. If the score comes out before we start classes in the fall, I think that we will accept that score and consider you for any admissions opportunities that we have, with no promises as to what we'd be able to do or what that might look like. But it's definitely a possibility. And I think other law schools may be thinking along those same lines. But I would encourage you to at least have a conversation with the schools you're considering, with the ones that you're thinking about, to get a better feel for what that might look like for them. The second question is, has it changed how law schools review files, right? So are they taking sort of a different approach to the level of scrutiny they would apply to applicants? I'll say that for us, it hasn't changed our process, right? We're still, looking to admit the strongest, most qualified, most diverse and skilled class that we can this year, and we'll do so moving forward. I don't think that it's changed that fundamentally for schools across the board. But again, if you have questions about those sorts of things, I think it at least bears asking. So, all right. So there's one more big question, right? I may have buried the lead there. What's going to happen in the fall? And I think a little birdie on my screen is giving you all the answer. We just don't know, right? There's more that we don't know than what we do know at this point in time. I think that any student going to an institution of higher education this fall should be prepared for the possibility that their curriculum will be delivered virtually. I don't think that we're immune from that, and that there's a possibility that we could start our semester online, right? We could conduct the whole semester online. It may be a hybrid thing. We just don't know because there's so many questions that have to be answered about COVID-19 and what governments will allow us to do and sort of what spaces we have to navigate that piece. But if that's a consideration and a factor for you, I think you've got to stay in contact with the schools that you're interested in. If you've been admitted to an institution, put a deposit down, sort of stay in contact with them throughout the summer so that you understand what you're walking into and what you're signing up for and what to expect in that semester. I think the closer we get to the semester, the better our answers will be. But right now, the answer is we don't really know, but you should be prepared for the possibility that in-class instruction won't be an option in the fall and you'll be taking courses online because it is a possibility. So just keep that in mind as you're making your decisions and continuing to think about your law school options. So let's talk a little bit about the LSAT, because I know you all are having questions about that and thinking about it. The fundamentals of the test, I think, are going to stay the same, right? You'll get those 5 35-minute sections of multiple choice questions with the 4 scored sections coming in the form of that reading comprehension section, that logical reasoning section, and the 2 logic games, and then an unscored section with your score still ranging from 120 to 180, and your unscored writing sample that I'm sure you all know at this point occurs from home. The caveat to that is that now the whole test may occur from home, but LSAC is a better resource for the details on that, and I'll drop that information for you all in a slide here shortly. So registering for the LSAT still occurs the same way, right? You do all of that through LSAC, and they manage that part of the process for you. The reason that we'll continue to rely on the LSAT is because of its reliability for us as a first-year predictor. Wayne State is not accepting the GRE in place of the LSAT, even in this circumstance. There are no plans to forego the LSAT being considered for applicants. So if that's a question for you, I want to make sure we get that part answered here. There may be other institutions that are having that conversation, and I would encourage you to reach out to them. But what I can say for Wayne is that our process will remain the same, with the LSAT being the standardized test that you must complete in order to be considered for our class, and also the one that we'll rely on to make decision making to help us make decisions in concert with how you perform in undergrad. So LSAT Flex, like we talked about, March and April LSATs, in-person LSATs were canceled, and in its place exists this fancy LSAT Flex option that LSAC has put together. To be candid, I don't have my arms fully around the details of it. All I know is that it's going to happen for you all in a way that allows you to take the test from home. I've posted some links here that I hope you all would use to give you some context from LSAC about what the test will look like and how it'll function. They give you a list of key facts and some FAQs. So if you have questions about that, don't reach out to the law schools, right? Specifically about the test. Reach out to LSAC, because they're the ones administering the exam, and they'll have better answers for you than the law schools will. I think there's sort of a tendency to think the law schools have more sway over how that works than we do. We get the information from LSAC, in the same capacity that you all do. We get access to similar information about it, but LSAC can answer specific and detailed questions that you might have about this LSAT Flex option. So let's just talk about the process, right? Because fundamentally that has not changed in this reality. I think that law schools are still looking for the same general things, broadly speaking, when evaluating applicants, right? We want to assess academic ability and performance, right? So getting a better understanding of how you as an applicant would fit in our academic pool, right? In this group that we have in our building taking classes together, and how competitive you would be in that group. And we're relying on the same sort of general factors that we always have, your performance in undergrad and your GPA, right? So understanding what that number represents about you as an applicant, or the trends in performance, considering the rigor of the institution and the program you chose, to really get an understanding of what that GPA says about what you were able to accomplish in a classroom during your undergraduate tenure. How did you perform on the LSAT, right? So that's the the common denominator amongst all law school applicants, at least for us as an institution, is that they have to take the LSAT. So that gives us something that we can rely on that's a common factor that helps us better understand how you rank and compete with your peers in that capacity. Looking at those two things together in concert gives us a picture on what we can expect for you in terms of first year outcomes, which can be predictive of second and third year outcomes. There's some correlation or relationship between those things, which is why we continue to rely on those factors primarily in the decision-making process. Letters of recommendation do have some influence here, right? So if you've got faculty who are willing to vouch for you and talk about who you are as a student in the classroom, how you show up in the classroom, how you participate and engage, the quality of your work and assignments, that can be helpful in helping us understand better your academic ability and performance. But driving that conversation and answering that question is your LSAT performance and your GPA. We'll also look at, in a second capacity, right, this big picture piece, right? So some of the soft skills, the things about you that don't show up necessarily in terms of your academic ability and performance, it's personality, it's accomplishments, it's character, it's fit, right? It's really getting a feel for who you are outside of a classroom and the value add that the institution gets from admitting you and having you matriculate into their class. And we sort that out through reviewing your personal statement, right? So getting an understanding of who you are and why you're here, right? What's the point of all this for you, right? Your resume, so the things that you've taken on and approached in your undergraduate career and post-graduation, if you're coming to us as somebody with a professional career who did some things after they graduated. Letters of recommendation can also shape and influence that conversation too, right? So letters of recommendation often touch on who somebody is and the aspects of their character that shine through most frequently or shine through at least to those recommenders. So we'll use those to help us figure that part out too. And then any addenda that you submit that provide context for us. So sometimes people answer affirmatively to character and fitness questions, right? So most law schools, I think all law schools will ask you if you had anything happen to you in your past, right? That, would be, criminal stuff or things that happen in school. Were you ever on probation or anything of that sort, right? And those addenda help us understand the whys and the whats on those, right? If there's something about your profile that you feel obligated to share with us that you think we should treat differently or we should do differently in the process. So if you're somebody who's historically not a great test taker and the LSAT is another test that maybe you didn't do great on, but in the past, you haven't done great on standardized tests and outpaced that in the classroom, students will provide you an addendum that says, hey, look, the test isn't who I am, my performance in the classroom is, and I like for it to be sort of viewed that way, right? On the other end of that scale, right, we've got people who maybe didn't do as well in undergrad, and there's reasons for that. There's a story behind, why they didn't accomplish in the classroom to the level that they expected, but they did really well on the LSAT, and they believe that that's a truer marker of their potential in law school, right? So they'll submit an addendum that helps us understand that. Anytime you look at your file and you say, that could be a red flag to an admissions committee, there's an opportunity there for you to submit an addendum that helps us understand what that red flag is and why and how we should view it, in light of your entire application. And then there's a third piece of this puzzle. I call it you versus everybody, right? And that's about how you compare to the applicant pool and then how your profile and your application aligns with the goals that we've set for ourselves as an institution from an enrollment perspective. So schools will have target medians for their LSAT and their GPA, demographic targets they like to hit, right? They'll have a class size in mind, and the number of people that they admit, will shape that number. And so you're sort of up against that as well in the process. You don't get a vote in that, and it can be very hard to change how the school views that or approaches that part of the process. But it is a thing that can influence and shape how those decisions are made. So Application elements in the timeline. So what's actually physically in an application? So there are some core pieces to that. The personal statement has to be in the, it has to be in there for, I would encourage you to reach out to the schools that you're considering to get a feel for exactly how they want that personal statement to show up. For us, it should be at least 2 pages, no more than 3, right? Double space, traditional margins, so don't do weird things with the margins, traditional font. You'll need a resume. I think for many students, 1 page is enough, but there are folks who come to us with different professional backgrounds and experiences who have significantly more resume to submit. I don't think that we've ever not admitted somebody because of the length of their resume, right? I think it's something that is helpful for us to understand about the experiences that you've had outside of the classroom, but don't spend too much time sort of worried about what the resume looks like. Just make sure that you have a resume and that it's in decent order. If there are things about your professional or volunteer or leadership experience that you want to highlight, I think you can order your resume to reflect that and highlight those things in that process. You'll need at least 2 letters of recommendation, no more than 4 for us at Wayne. The caveat to that is that if you have graduated in the last 2 years, at least one of your letters of recommendation has to come from a faculty member. So it has to be somebody who's taught you in a classroom, had you in a classroom setting. We can speak to that. It's something that our committee relies on and values very highly in that process. You'll also have to submit your transcripts from every institution you've attended post-high school. So you went to community college for a semester, right? Whatever you did post-high school should be included. Graduate level transcripts as well. We'll also need your LSAT scores, right? That will also need to be included in that file as well. And all of that data gets compiled into something called a JD Credential Assembly Service Report. So in this process, when you all interact with LSAC, the mothership for the application process, you'll be required to pay for something called the Credential Assembly Service. And functionally what that does is they take all of your undergraduate grades and they compile that together and give us a master GPA that we use in helping support our decision-making process. It will also report to us all of the LSATs that you've taken, right? So we'll see all of those scores. If you've canceled a score or withdrew or whatever, we'll see all of that. Schools, we don't treat you differently, right? If you've got cancels or withdrawals on there, we'll use the highest score to make the decision, right, in terms of the admissions piece. So if that's a question for you, hopefully we've answered that as well. And those are like the core pieces that you'll need to be in a position to have your file considered for admission. Now, in a traditional cycle, the timeline for that is pretty straightforward, right? For most students, what they'll do is they'll take the LSAT the summer before they intend to begin their application. So let's say, theoretically, you want to start in fall 2021, right? You would take an LSAT the summer before that, right? So this summer, functionally, you'd start to submit your applications this fall and start to receive some decisions early next year, right? And get a better feel for what your options may look like. I don't anticipate the process changing drastically next year. Things could be different. I don't know, right? So I won't for a second pretend that I know how all of this is going to play out. But I think that if the intent for you is to begin in fall 2021, that is going to be your process, right? You take an LSAT this summer or even early fall, right? And use those scores to support your candidacy for admission to a class. And I think you should approach it that way and honor that part of the process. So that would be sort of what the timeline would look like in a traditional capacity. For those of you who are already in the application process for fall 2020, I'm sure some of you have received admissions decisions and started to make some choices about where you want to go. And I think that's process is going to continue on, right? So admissions decisions will continue to be rendered. I think that people will have to make some choices about where they want to go and how they want to go, and sort of manage the process that way. So I don't anticipate things being drastically different for fall 2021. So things to consider about the application process and the timeline. For those of you who are thinking 2021, it's best to apply early, right? The sooner you get your application in, I think the better your chances are. Law school application processes are generally rolling ones. So applications are being reviewed as they're received, and decisions are being made as places go, and there's more room in a class early than there is late. So if you're somebody who maybe doesn't see themselves as being necessarily a great fit for a place, if it's your dream school, right, and that just looking at your LSAT score and GPA, that you don't fit neatly into their medians, maybe you're in the lower quartile, or maybe that's sort of where your profile fits. You want to apply early so that if the institution is going to be in a position to make an offer to you, they've got a little bit more room in their class to do it, right? That's the functionality of applying early, is that you give yourself the best chance because you're in the first set of applications that a place reviews, and the strengths of your application may be able to get you over that hump and past the things that maybe aren't as strong about the app. So now, own the parts of this that you can control, right? I mean, I don't think that, and that's true for, all applicants, those of you who are in the process now, and those of you who are beyond the process, who will be in the process soon, right? Own the parts of this you can control, and, relinquish control where you can't, right? I think that it's tough because there's a lot, there's some uncertainty in this process generally, right? And for those of you who are in this process now for fall 2020, it feels even less, right, certain. And I think you've got to let go of that part of it, right, and acknowledge that uncertainty is what we're all dealing with right now, and start thinking about, all right, well, what makes the most sense for me? What gives me the best chance for success? What institution is best positioned to, sort of help me get where I have to go? Because I don't think that's going to be fundamentally different, right? And so just be thoughtful about the parts of it that you can be. Be thorough throughout this process. Again, be thoughtful and be the best you. Make the best case for yourself. So, and the other piece to this is that you should plan it, right? If you can plan it, do so. If it's not if you planning isn't your jam, right? This is absolutely the time to get into your planning bag, as the kids say, right? And do the things you need to do to set yourself up to be successful, because you do need to be thoughtful. Again, I know we're in sort of unprecedented times, right? But being thoughtful and planning this process out can help you be in a position to be successful in the long term. So dollars and cents, right? Because there are costs associated with this process and things to think about there too. So application process costs and hacks. On the cost side, you've got law school application fees, right? Institutions do still carry application fees, and so you need to know for the places you've applied to whether or not they're charging those. Wayne State does not have an application fee, so that's good news for you all. But there's also other costs associated with the process. Like I talked about earlier, the credential assembly service that is offered by LSAC is offered at a cost. So make sure you understand what that is, and you've got a handle on it, and you've budgeted out your funds appropriately so that you can manage that part of the process. Taking the LSAT also has a cost associated with it. And in this slide, you'll see a link to get more information about that, so you can have a better handle on it. Seat deposits are also a thing. So if you intend to be at an institution and you want to remain in consideration, you will have to put a seat deposit down to ensure that you have the opportunity to be in that place's class, right? So schools have not foregone the seat deposit generally, right? Even for those of us, even in this COVID-19 crisis, right? Schools still need some certainty from you and some commitment in the form of that seat deposit to know that you do intend to join them in their class. And so you have to be prepared for that part of the process and have the ability to invest in that. If you do intend to go to a place, or you want to remain in consideration, throughout the summer, as you're going through the decision-making process, you'd have to put a seat deposit down to be able to ensure that your seat in that class is maintained. For us, if you do join us, the seat deposit that you've paid does go towards the cost of your tuition. So it's not just money going nowhere. It does go towards the cost of your tuition. So some hacks to that, right? How do you get around it? How do you navigate that? How do you manage that piece of the process? Application fee waivers are a thing. So if you're applying to places that have an application fee, I think you should be requesting requesting a fee waiver and doing whatever it is they need you to do to get it, right? So if you real seriously want to go to a place and you're thinking about it, and it's, if a place you admitted you would go, you should be asking them for a fee waiver and making sure that you get that cost offset in the ways that you can. LSAC also has a fee waiver system. It is need-based, right? So I think you have to be able to demonstrate that there's financial need for the costs of using their services being offset by them as an institution. And I've got a link there that will give you the details about how to go through that process and what that request will look like. Don't be afraid to appeal the first answer you get from them, because sometimes the answer is no and you have to appeal it. And just exhaust the process right before you accept that you'll have to pay for those fees if it is something that you need and you want to engage as a part of that process. So paying for law school, things to think about. So everybody's concerned about how they pay for law school, right? It's an expensive proposition, and I think that nobody should enter into it lightly. For most people, right, they're looking at a combination of scholarship dollars and loan funds to sort of cover the cost of their legal education, right? Some schools have need-based regimes in terms of how they dole out their aid, but a good number of places it's merit-based, right? So we're on the front end of this process, we're reviewing your application, and based on the merit of the application, we're making decisions about whether or not we're going to dole out scholarship dollars, right? And so that's how that process will function. Wayne State is one of those institutions, so we don't have a need-based regime. The students that join us are typically there on a combination of scholarship dollars and federal loan funds, and they're using those two things together to cover the cost of their education. It is not unheard of for students to work in law school, right? I know there are people who have that question, can I work and also go to law school? And the answer is yes. It's a challenge, right? I think you have to consider whether or not you'd be going full-time or not. Wayne has an evening program and also a combined day evening program that supports students who will need to work. And I think there'll be more of those students coming, right, in the future than there have been in the past, because of the economic realities that we have. Like, folks are going to be thinking about, all right, I need to try to figure out how to do this and also be able to pay my own way, right? And so you should be thinking about that in your process and considering institutions that have things that will support you being able to do what it is that you need to do. There's also the private loan route. Some people choose to go, through their bank or credit union or credit card company or whatever it is to pursue loans in a non-traditional capacity. That's absolutely something that you can do. There are less grants and things like that exist at the undergraduate level, like there isn't a law school Pell Grant, right? So if you're a Pell Grant recipient, like, you don't get a Pell Grant to go to law school. It just doesn't function that way. Some schools will have institutional level, sort of smaller scholarships. Those are typically allotted to the students who are already in the program, right? So it'll be, a scholarship that's endowed by an alum who's donated this money, and you've got to do X thing to be in a position to receive the scholarship or be considered for it. Those do exist. But on the front end, the largest bulk of aid goes through scholarship dollars awarded on that merit-based sort of continuum that acknowledges your academic performance, so performance on the LSAT, performance in undergrad, the consideration of sort of those soft factors that we talked about earlier as well. So so when you're thinking about paying for law school, those are a few of the things you should consider. So why us? Why Wayne Law? Which is a great question. If you're here and in this room, you are absolutely considering Wayne as a place to go to in the future. So let's talk about what the value proposition is, right? I think the biggest piece is that it's a good education, right? That's the that's what you want out of this process, is to get a good legal education. We've been named the best value law school for 5 years in a row, and I don't think that's going to change. I think it can be challenging to find, value in this process. But when all things considered, this is, you get a good education at a decent cost. And if you're a well-qualified applicant, there's a really good chance you'll get scholarship dollars out of it. We awarded $7 million worth of scholarships last year, right? And so we're not afraid to, for students who we believe are a good fit and have the qualifications that we're looking for, to reward that accomplishment in the form of scholarship dollars. And our cost for this academic year is about $33,000, which is, in the grand scheme of things, right, affordable as far as law school goes. There's also some flexibility, like I talked about. We've got that combined day-evening program and the evening program. You can go full-time in the daytime if you'd like to, right? We've got dual degree options if that's something that's of interest to you. Criminal justice, business, dispute resolution, econ, history, political science, and the value there is that you get those 2 degrees in roughly 4 years, right? Of those, I think the MBA is probably our most popular in terms of programs that students choose, but you've also got other options there. So if you're thinking about dual degrees, it's an option if that's something that you are interested in. There's also our practical training piece, right? We've got a broad suite of clinical, externship, and internship options. The clinics are asylum and immigration law clinic, business and community law clinic, appeal and post-conviction advocacy, disability law, legal advocacy for people with cancer. You'll want to get involved, right, and take what you've learned in the classroom and put it into practice. And it's a requirement for you to engage with the law in that way. You have to do one of those things in order to graduate. That experiential piece is such a central part of the process. And I think our students, either through an externship, a clinical opportunity, hit that button and find themselves doing great things. So if you're looking for that practical on the boots training where you can take your legal education from theory to practice, that practical training piece is a good asset for you. The last piece of it is location, right? I mean, Detroit is, one of those cities that people are talking about differently than they have in the past. I think that, people like to refer to it as Detroit resurrected. I like to refer to it as Detroit recognized, right? Detroit's always been here, and it's always been a vibrant and beautiful city. And I think people are starting to recognize that there's more to it than the bad stories that you hear about on the news. And there's some investment happening here that hasn't been happening in the past. And so, I think if you're looking for the next city, Detroit should definitely be on that list. We're located in the Midtown area. We're near the top law firms, the courthouses, Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, government agencies, right? So if you're looking for interesting ways to use your legal education, this community is a good one to be a part of. If you're considering practicing law in the state of Michigan, specifically Southeastern Lower Michigan at all, Wayne should be on your list and probably at the top of it because market reputation is so strong. There's a great alumni network, right? When firms are coming to make the hires of summer associates and post-graduation associates, right? This is the place they're coming, right? This is the school they're coming to. These are the students they're sort of trying to woo and cultivate. And that alumni network shows up right in those spaces. So you'll definitely build some connections in a network that you can use coming to Wayne, and that's an asset for you. So at this point, I'm going to move into the question piece. So I'm going to close the presentation. I know you all have questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can get into these questions and try to get those answered for you. So will Wayne scholarship deadline be extended for prospective fall 2020 applicants? So the scholarship deadline, right, the priority deadline was March 15th, and that hasn't changed. I think what we will do is continue to review applications and review our available scholarship dollars and endeavor to make competitive offers to students who we believe are a good fit for the class based on what we have available. So is the seat fee at Wayne State per class or one to cover all? If that's a question about the seat deposit, the seat deposit just secures your seat in the class, right? So it's not in a specific class, but in the class of students who's being admitted at that time. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Is the $33,000 just for tuition, or does it include other expenses? So that largely covers tuition and fees, right? It doesn't cover room and board, any of those costs. Those are separate costs that are typically included in your overall cost of attendance, which is a process that happens on the financial aid side, and you'll get that calculation in the process. With the LSAT Flex, can you still be a prospect for scholarship? The answer to that is yes, right? I mean, it's an LSAT score. So we would definitely consider students who've taken Flex for a scholarship consideration to the extent that we have scholarship dollars available. Let's see here. So somebody's planning on applying for fall 2021. When should they take the LSAT, and when should you apply? So we touched on this, right? I think that one of the things that the process fundamentally should remain the same, right? You should be thinking about taking an LSAT this summer or early fall with the intention of submitting applications in the fall so that you have some clarity and some questions and able to answer your question and able to get some clarity on your status sometime early next year and be able to move forward from there. If you're trying to improve on your GPA, should you apply early in the cycle or wait until after the first semester of senior year? I mean, I think it depends on how much your grades are going to improve, right? I think that if your GPA, if you're in your senior year, right, your GPA is largely set. Barring anything unforeseen, I think that the gains that you could get would be nominal at best. But if you're ready to apply, submit. If the decision isn't what you want, and then you get a new set of grades, you can request reconsideration based on those new grades, because that's new information and new data. But I encourage people, only apply when you're ready. So if you want to improve your grades, don't apply before you do. Right? If you feel like that's going to be something that's important for you, then don't apply until you're ready to apply and those grades are improved. So Chelsea's asking, oh, wait a minute, that looks like I think I answered that one already. Yeah, so any recommendations on good test prep materials for the LSAT? So this is a popular question, and it's less about recommendation and more about considerations, right? So I think that when you're thinking about preparing for the LSAT, you should be asking yourself a few questions. The first question is, how do I prefer to study, right? Am I somebody who needs to be in a classroom, right, around other people, learning that way? Am I somebody who can succeed and be successful in a self-guided sort of study process, right? Would I be better if I, used a prep service that gave me an online option so I could approach it that way? And I think thinking about how you study and learn best is important. I think you have to think about how much time you would have to dedicate to the study process and being honest with yourself about that. I think you should also be thinking about how much money you have to spend on it, right? And I think answering all of those questions will help you put together a decision-making matrix about where you want to go, about where you want to go in terms of your prep process. So be thinking about that and making sure that you understand those three questions, and I think your options will become more clear there. I think that most folks engage in some way with prep. There are some folks who are able to do it successfully self-guided. Some people need that commercial prep. And there are some of us who are truly gifted who don't need it at all, right? It's a very small portion of the population, but most people need to have that that formalized prep structure to help them succeed. And there are a lot of commercial options. There's Kaplan, there's Testmasters, there's PowerScore, there's Princeton Review, and they all have good things that work for them and things that people may not be as excited about. So do your research, understand sort of what your options are, and move forward that way. All right, so looks like Caitlin is living and working overseas. and concerned about air travel and what options will look like. Testing is not available. If I'm unable to take it as planned, how will this affect my? So that's an interesting question, Caitlin. I mean, if you can't take the LSAT, right, I would say that a good number of law schools are not going to be in a position to consider you for admission unless you've already got an LSAT on record rather. So if you've got an LSAT score on record, then they would just use that existing score to make the decision. But if you are unable to take an LSAT in any capacity during this cycle, then I think it could be challenging for you to be considered at all for admission, let alone funding and scholarships. So I think you have to think about, all right, well, how do I get to a place where I can actually take the LSAT, right? If this is my worst case scenario, what are my options? I think the LSAT flex piece could be a workaround for you. I don't know how the LSAT is going to navigate that region piece. Whether or not they would even region lock it that way, right? You can't take it if you're in this part of the country, even if it's being done in this flex capacity. But I think that if LSAT carries the flex thing forward, it may present you an option that allows you to take it even in a place where you can't get back to taking it in a true classroom setting. All right, so Daniel's wondering if he should play the odds and wait until LSAC changes its logic game section, and is that worth waiting for? I don't know enough about what that process is going to look like to give you an answer. I think that we don't know what it would look like, right, and what that's going to mean. And so I think that the bottom line is, you take the LSAT when you're ready to take it. Trying to game it, I think, could lead to some unintended outcomes, right? And you don't know what the marketplace is going to look like in 2023, and and how all of this is going to change. And so, if you're ready to take it and feel prepared to take it now, then take it now. It's a learnable test. I think people hate logic games, and I understand why. But it's a learnable test. So if you feel good about your ability to do it, then just do it and take on that opportunity. If you're not ready, then don't rush and take it. But I don't know if it should be about 2023 or logic games being phased out. It should be about your level of readiness and preparedness. Somebody's Sovereign O was saying that feels more like a statement than a question. So saw that a woman was denied admission because she had previously sued as a private citizen. Is that considered a negative here also? Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about that to be able to give you a great answer, Sovereign O. I think that, schools consider character and fitness in the process, right? And they have to make decisions based on, whatever they deem to be a good fit for their institution. And I don't have enough information to be able to give you an answer that would be sufficient there. So Law Start applicants are eligible for scholarships. My understanding is that they're treated in the process in the same capacity as the rest of our class. If you are a good applicant, competitive, and it's a merit-based process, right? So you'd be treated as the rest of the applicants and considered for scholarships in the same capacity. Is there anything a waitlisted applicant should be doing to better their chances? I think that's a case-by-case piece. But broadly speaking, I would encourage any waitlisted applicant to submit to us a why Wayne statement or a statement of continued interest that helps us better understand, why you want to come to Wayne, whether or not you would actually show up if we were in a position to admit you, right? Because that is a consideration. Is when we're making decisions from the wait list, is okay, is this somebody that we're confident if we admit them that they'll actually deposit and show up for us, right? So that's a piece. If you can look at your profile and say, well, my LSAT score isn't great, right? Then I think an improved LSAT score could help your chances as well. So those are sort of the things that I would say broadly that waitlisted applicants can do. The other thing is to be patient, right? These decisions can take time, and sometimes it can be later in the cycle when we make decisions from that wait list. But that's the only advice I can really give you at this point. Are we providing deposit deadline extensions for fall 2020 admitted students? And do you expect waitlisted students to have to wait a longer period of time to hear a final answer? We have not, I think deposit deadline extensions are case by case in any year, right? So it's not a blanket decision. If you are an admitted candidate and who in a position where that's necessary, I suggest that you contact us directly about that. And we can have that conversation and explore what our options are. I don't expect our waitlisted students to have to wait any longer than they would in a normal year, right, to hear about a final answer. I think that we could be making decisions from the wait list, until we feel like the class is set. And that could happen in the next month. It could happen later in the summer. It could be the first day of classes, right? We just don't know. And so we'll continue to review the wait list and make decisions from there. Do waitlisted students usually receive any scholarships? Again, the scholarship question is based on what's available. So it'd be difficult for me to tell you what a waitlisted student should expect. If you are a qualified waitlist applicant and we've got scholarship dollars available, I think that we could be in a position to do that. But again, it's a case-by-case piece. And so, I think that there's potential that could happen, but no guarantees. This is a broad question, but are any programs for veterans, any considerations for military veterans in the application process? We love vets, right? I mean, obviously that's I think every school wants to have veterans in their building, right? And we love to have vets in our process, and it's something that we absolutely consider along with all the other pieces of the application. So if you are a veteran, you are more than encouraged to apply to Wayne Law, and we would love to have you if you're a qualified applicant and a good fit. Is the disability clinic for SSA or ADA? My understanding is that it's a clinic that deals with issues related to disability law, and I'm presuming that would cover both SSA and ADA, but that's a very specific question that we can probably get you an answer to at a later date in greater detail. So the LSAT Flex is 3 sections and the regular LSAT is 5 sections. So will you consider both scores the same way? Again, we don't know. I mean, I know everybody wants clarity on all of the things today, and the answer is we just don't know. I know that's not what anybody wants to hear, right? But we'll do the best we can to make the best decisions that we can based on the information that we have available to us at any given time. I think LSAC will do a great job of helping us understand what a score on the LSAT Flex means, right, versus one that happened in a traditional LSAT space, so that we as a body, right, law school admissions professionals can make informed decisions, but we don't know what those answers are going to look like. I don't expect us to treat them necessarily different, but I don't know what the scores will look like and how LSAT is going to communicate that to us. So it will be irresponsible for me to say definitively what the chances will be for somebody who takes the LSAT Flex. So how will the current economic climate affect scholarships? Will it affect how they're awarded in the near future? Another question to which I don't have the answer, right? I mean, I think that we don't know how anything is going to impact anything today. There's still enough new information and new things happening that we can't predict what will happen in the future related to scholarship dollars. What I know is that we intend to continue to evaluate all of our applicants on the same criteria. And if we, based on our funds available, see a qualified applicant, award scholarships until we no longer have scholarship dollars available in this cycle. Future cycles, I don't know what's going to happen. It's just, it's a tough space. So I don't know what that will look like, but it could have an impact. Things could be different. So you have to be prepared for that too. Do the combined day-evening applications receive the same consideration for scholarships as traditional day applicants? So I think that the answer to that is yes, right? We consider our combined day-evening applicants in much the same capacity, right? In that we award scholarships based on merit. And if you're a meritorious applicant, then we would award scholarship dollars. What are some of the best online options, programs for studying for the LSAT? There are a lot of different options, and I think best is relative. So I think that you should review what options are out there, and sort of do a pros and cons analysis for yourself, make a choice about what works for you. I think the traditional sort of tentpole programs people rely on heavily. So the Kaplans of the world, the Princeton Reviews of the world, right? The Test Masters and Power Scores of the world are ones that you all people typically sort of lean on, but there are other options out there that could be better for you. So I would encourage you to do some research and make some choices based on some of the things that we've talked about. What's your budget? How much time do you have to dedicate, and how do you best learn? So do graduate school grades get calculated in the GPA? No, they do not. So the GPA that is used to make the decisions on admissions considers only your undergraduate grades in its calculation. We do see your graduate level transcripts, right? And so it can be helpful information for us, but in terms of that actual GPA, it would be your undergraduate grades. The LLM, somebody's got an LLM program question. It shows that my application is transmitted, but no one can contact me about my application. So we'll send us an email, and we'll figure out how to get you in contact with the right people about the LLM application. So we'll get you in contact with the right people on that. Wayne State offers tuition for full-time employees. Do you know if this extends to the law school as well? If you're a Wayne State employee, I would encourage you to reach out to your HR rep to see what options you would have in terms of your tuition benefits covering your law school tuition. What are some of the greatest mistakes that applicants make on their applications, and what are some good ways of preventing those mistakes? I think that mistakes is a funny word, right? I think that, you are who you are when you apply, right? And I think the best thing that you can do in the process is be transparent and honest and be yourself, right? Your grades are your grades. So you can't, once those grades are in, you can't, unbake that cake, right? That cake is baked. I think be thoughtful about this and consider the decision that people are making about you, and make sure that your application is an accurate reflection of who you are. And I think that if you do that, you've got to be willing to live with what those outcomes are. Not every law school is for you, right? The school that's your dream school may not necessarily be a great fit for you, right? You may not be a great fit for that institution. So, just make sure that you're keeping perspective in the process and giving yourself the best shot based on the best case that you can make for yourself in that process. What scholarships do you have available specifically for DPS students? So we do have the Damon J. Keith Scholarship, which is designed specifically for students who've attended schools in the city of Detroit, so DPS grads. If you went to a private or a charter school in the city and also lived in the city at the same time, that's an option as well. So, if you went to an HBCU, an HSI, tribal colleges or universities, you'd be eligible for that scholarship as well. So hopefully that answers your question. Are full scholarships available for the dual JD MBA program? Can you receive scholarships as a Canadian citizen? So what I do know about the scholarship piece on our side, I don't know. Yeah, I think that I think scholarship dollars could cover tuition across both programs. I'm not 100% sure, but send us an email and we can get you an answer on that. Are we accepting for fall 2020, or is the class full? The application is still open for the fall 2020 class. So if you are interested in submitting an application, please do so. When is the scholarship deadline for winter 2021? I'm presuming that it would be similar to this year, but honestly, I don't know what's going to change about anything about our processes. So I would encourage you to stay in contact with us, and we'll have that information out probably soon. If I was a wagering man, I'd wager it'd be similar to this year, in which it would be mid-March sometime. But again, everything could be different. So the answer to that is I don't know, and I would encourage you to stay in contact with us. Are there scholarships for students with learning disabilities? And are learning disabilities looked at unfavorably in the application process? We don't have scholarships specifically for students with learning disabilities, right? I think we consider all of our students on the, in the same capacity, right? And we're trying to answer the same questions about every applicant, no matter the story. So learning disabilities are not viewed unfavorably in the application process. If you require accommodation, right, as a part of the process, right, then you go through the accommodations process. We've got the office support for that, so it won't be a question of whether or not you can get the supports that you need, right? So, I think you'd be considered for the same scholarships as your peers. There just aren't any specific scholarships for that population. The last I read, there were two logical reasoning sections and one logic game section, but it looks like that's changed. I don't know why the sections are what they are. That's an LSAT question. So if you have questions about the sections, I would encourage you to reach out to LSAC to try to get an answer about that. My undergraduate GPA is a 2.95. Should I get a second bachelor's to raise my GPA? The second bachelor's won't raise your GPA. It just gives you a second bachelor's with a different GPA. If I think that, sort of trying to game the system that way, I don't know if, the outcome would necessarily be what you intend, right? If you want to get a second bachelor's, I think you should feel free to do it. But I think the GPA that ends up getting reported is the first undergraduate GPA. So it won't be raised by that second bachelor's. When an application says in review, how long should we expect for it to be complete? Will we receive an email when it is? Typically, I would say anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, right, is, 4 to 8 weeks from the time the application shows complete on our end. So when we've got everything we need for the application to be done, I think is when how that process works. Will we receive an email when it's complete? You'll receive an email when a decision has been made on your file. So you should be looking out for that. And I would anticipate that would happen in that window of time that we talked about, so anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. I have a bachelor's, master's, and some doctoral credit. A teacher, would I be deemed competitive for scholarship for experience, or is it holistic? Again, it's our process is primarily merit-based, right? So we'll be looking at the factors that we've talked about. So undergraduate GPA, performance on the LSAT, and then consideration of those soft factors. Without seeing your entire file, I can't tell you what your level of competitiveness for scholarship dollars. But I think you got to apply. If you want to see if you can get scholarships, the only way to really do that is to apply, and we'll let you know what scholarship you get as a result of that process. Just to clarify, you will accept the LSAT flex score. I've received no indication that we won't accept it. If that changes, then I think we would let people know, right? But I don't anticipate that we would not, and we wouldn't accept the LSAT flex. Can your GPA prevent you from being admitted, or could my LSAT score outweigh? I think the answer to that is it depends, right? If your GPA is so low that it it isn't something we could consider, a strong LSAT score may not outweigh that, right? Because it raises questions about your ability to be successful in the classroom. I think the inverse is true, right? So if you've got a really low GPA, really low LSAT, but a really high GPA, it can raise some questions about your readiness to come in and to compete with the students that we already have in that institution. So can you defer admission if admitted? That is on a case-by-case basis. So if you are admitted and have some circumstances that may be enticing you to defer your admission, I would encourage you to contact our admissions office, and then we can proceed from there with what our options might look like. Can I speak briefly to opportunities post-graduation for Wayne graduates? How important are law school rankings for jobs after law school graduation? So, I think the big picture here is that, Wayne Law grads get jobs. I think we're, typically 80% or so of our graduates are getting those JD Advantage or, bar passage required jobs, right? The ones you come to law school to get. How important are rankings for jobs after law school graduation? Uh, if we're talking about class, like ranking in the class, I mean, I think it depends on the kind of job you want, right? If you want, the big fancy corporate job, I think you got to kick butt in law school to get it, right? I mean, that's just a truism of, how this profession works. Is that the biggest and best firms are in a position to consider the best students and the best students only, and they do that, right? And so those opportunities will go to those students, and they'll be in a position to take advantage of that. But if you want to be a lawyer, right, and you want to, get out there and practice, I think that's absolutely an option coming from Wayne. So long as you do the work that you need to do, right? You pass the bar, you get, decent grades, I think you'll be in good shape. I plan to submit my application in the fall. May I ask my professors to submit their letters of recommendation following this semester? Uh, if you've started the application process, and you've got your profile set up already, I think you can input your recommenders and request that they submit those letters in anticipation of the fact that you'll be submitting the entire application later. What percentage of the law school classes is admitted early in the process? I mean, I don't know if I know the raw number in terms of the people that are admitted early. I mean, it's a rolling process. So we're making decisions as we receive applications. I think that we want to do the bulk of that work on the front end, right? We don't want to be in June or July trying to, put together 75% of our class. So I think if, you want to be in the best position to be admitted, it's better to apply early than to apply later. I think that I've covered at least most of the bases in terms of questions, and we are at the 4:30 time that's designed to stop this thing. So I do want to honor people's time. I want to thank everybody that joined us today. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my team behind the screen, Kaylee in our communications office, my colleague Jill Burnett Maurice, somewhere out there too. So we appreciate all that support. I would encourage you all to stay in contact with us here at Wayne Law. For any questions that you have in the future, please feel free to send us an email or give us a call. We are working remotely, so we are not closed. So if you call, you will get to somebody and you'll get your question answered. If you send an email, you'll get a response to that too. Please be safe. Don't go outside unless you have to. Take care of your loved ones, and everybody have a good day. Thank you.